Okay, so I'm going to expand just a little bit more on what we've done so far, and we're going to build a Excel file importer and exporter. And I'm going to do everything from the ground up so you can see the whole command line process here, and we'll take a look at the command line for some of the other apps also. So I have a little text file here just kind of showing the steps. We're going to create a new tmux session, then we're going to create a Python environment, change in that environment, start the environment, install Jam.py. We're going to install this open pixel Py XL library to be able to work with Excel files. We're going to run the project um, on port 8090. We're going to go into the browser and do all the work of creating the database. And then later on, we're going to deactivate the environment and delete the entire project. So get an entire run through again. We covered a lot of that in tutorial, but we'll start out here with this. So let's start by creating a tmux new session. It's new/s, and we'll call this jam import. So we've started a new session. You can tell by the green on the bottom. I am using putty for SSH to uh, go into my account on E2 and do all this on a Linux Ubuntu server. So we've got this session. Now we are going to run Python 3 and Linux use Python 3 /m v and v to create a Python environment. We're going to call that jam import. It creates a folder which we are going to change into. And in that folder, we're going to run source bin activate. That creates the session. You can tell because this is at the beginning of the line. And from there, we have now environment. We have an environment in Python where we can pip install Jam.py. And that was already installed, but it doesn't take much longer than that normally. And we are also going to install pip install. Let's get the name of this library right. Is that PYXL? Good. Install that whole thing. And I can see we've got in our bin folder this Jam project, which is what we use to initialize a project in a folder. So we'll do Python 3 to run that Jam project file in the bin folder. And now you can see we've got some more files created. These are the sort of stock files that we need to run a jam.py project. We're going to use Python 3 again to run that server.py, and we'll run it at port 8090. Now we have a server running, so we can go over to our browser. We're going to go to the builder. So run this now. It's a new instance. I got to restart this. And we need to set up the project, so we'll set this up as English. And let's see, call this Jam project. The Python name jam_project with lowercase. We're going to go ahead and use SQLite here. And call the database jam project. Not sure what we did here, but name it this way originally, but we'll see what we get. Okay, so now we have our familiar jam.py interface. We're going to create a journal, create a new table that has a name. Oops, we want to call this people. Messed up here. We're going to call that a people table. And go. The first column will be name, text column, and then the next column will be an address column. It's also a text column. And then we're going to create a phone column. And that will also be a text column. Okay, so we've got a database built, ready to go. And so to show how kind of just went about this using some AI code generation, I found in the documentation how to import CSV files, but I particularly want to be able to import Excel files. So I took this whole blob of code that explained how to do all this in both the front end and the back end using JavaScript on the front end and um, Python code on the back end to perform the import. You can see here, like you've seen in the tutorial, there is a button which is created. And when that button is clicked, it runs this CSV import function. And there's another button created for export. When that button is clicked, it runs this CSV export function. So here's our two functions. They return an error if there's an error. Otherwise, um, it runs this bit of code. And what it's really doing is running the export CSV function on the server. And same thing here, the CSV import JavaScript function on the front end is going to run the import function on the server. Okay, and so we have this code for Python 3, and they also provide a little bit of code for Python 2 because Python 2 runs in um, or Jam.py runs in Python 2. So I went over to ChatGPT and just take a quick look at the prompts here to see what we had to do to get this code easily generated. So I wrote this code from the Jam.py documentation, explains how to import and export data from CSV files. I copied all the code you saw there previously in the documentation and went through a little back and forth here, and it provided a workbook here where we could look at the code and work with it on screen. GPT is nice like that because you can actually run code. Tells us to install the library that we need to run that code, which we've done. I asked if that would run in Python 3.8, and it gave me all the reasons why it would, because I have Python 3.8 installed by default on the server. So first thing I ran into is I got a little error that popped up. I just copied that code without even looking at it at first into the application. And to be clear, I'll show you where we do that. We go into the application builder, and we did this in the first tutorial. For this journal, for the people journal, we have a client module and a server module. So all of our Python code goes in the server module, and all of our JavaScript code goes in the front end module, in the client module. Okay, so just sort of tried the output right away to see how it worked, and went back and forth with some questions. I noticed that the file import type here was incorrect on the server. Went back and forth, and I pasted a couple of errors in. I noticed that one of the answers it gave a function definition using the Python way of defining functions, and pasted some code in. So there was no real work here. I just kind of output the errors. And in the end, I also, when I got the code established, it ran, but without errors. I created a little document in Google Docs. So I have some example document to work with. And notice it wasn't importing anything. And GPT very quickly noticed that the column headers were different and asked me to look at the actual names of the columns in the database system, and they were lowercase. So that's important. I made sure that they were named the same way. You could either change the names in the database system or change the names in the spreadsheet. I just went ahead and edited the names in the spreadsheet. And then it also noticed one more thing that actually I didn't think about. And it wasn't, I was getting an error here that these bits of code were not working correctly. And so I went back to the application builder, and it suggested that in the project file, I look in the parameters, and right there is a list of extensions that are allowed. So we're going to add .xlsx. Now we can import XLSX files. Otherwise, you get, unrelated to the code, an error from the system saying that you can't upload those sorts of files. So that's how to do that in the application builder. Let's go ahead and get our code here. So if I can find it in GPT. May need to go back up a ways and see if we can actually get the final code that we used here. There's some debugging information there, but let's see if we can find this code. Go. I think that's it. So we've got, so this is what we have created for the back end. This looks like our final version here. I'm going to copy all that. You can see those are Python functions. Copy all that. Time copy. We're going to put that in the Python module. Save it. You can see it identifies the functions, so we can jump to those quickly in the editor. And we're going to look for the JavaScript functions. It looks like we don't have the full set of functions here, so I have to look around a little bit in our interaction with GPT. I'll go ahead and take what I've got here, this in the JavaScript. So we've got a function to handle, to create the buttons and to handle the events, the click events, and we only have an XLSX export function. Let's see if we can find that import function somewhere else here in our chat history. Let's see here. Go a little farther. Still looking at what's going to say, please provide a JavaScript import. Yeah. See if it knows the context well enough to understand that. Okay. So copy that. Save it. And let's go to our application now, or refresh this page and see what we get. So this is all live. I'm going to import this Excel file, create it, and there we go. It's fully working. And that was entirely as just created by ChatGPT using the code that was created by ChatGPT. Now let's go ahead and add a new person. I have an example here what I did previously. Bill Billman, 1 Bill Lane, Bill City, New York. Let's do that same thing. Bill Billman. Way. Bill City, New York. I'm not sure what I put for the zip code. Sure I put for his phone number, but you get the idea here. 223. Enter that. Now we've got a new entry, and we'll go ahead and export this. There we go. People 1 now compared to our people. This is what I got before when I looked at what I was uploading. Let's go ahead and upload this one more time into Google Docs and see how it looks. Upload a file here. And it looks like I have not approved this yet, so let's one more time. Go back here. I said we should keep this for security purposes. That's done. Okay, now one more time, we'll upload this one. Uh, let's go ahead and keep both files. Upload this one. Take a look at it, and ta-da! Exactly as needed. We have a file importer and exporter using JavaScript on the front end and Python on the back end. It's that simple to start using Python code of any sort. So you can see we imported a library, did some practical work with that Python, wrote some JavaScript to deal with the front end, to add a button to the interface and to handle the click, and all the rest of this JavaScript, as well as the Python, is very easily generated by a chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini or DeepSeek or any of the others, Claude, that are generally um, good at writing JavaScript and Bootstrap and jQuery and any sort of standard Python. So hopefully that gives a little bit more of a understanding about how you do all this, and how you can use um, auto-generated code from an AI to build this sort of functionality out as you need in the system. So finally, let's go back, and I am going to stop this server, and we're going to deactivate. Actually, I don't know if I want to completely delete this project, but if I did, these are the only three um, lines in the console that need to be entered. So I would deactivate my current, stop this and deactivate my current session. So that would deactivate the Jam import session. We'd be back at a console without that Python environment, so without the libraries installed. And then next, I would change back to the main directory, because you can see we're in the Jam import directory, and then I would just remove rm/r. Be very careful doing this. I would remove that folder. Be sure not to remove another folder that you don't intend to. So that's it. We'll upload this file so you have the commands to see how the entire project was created. I will leave that in place so that you can play with the project at port 8090 on appstagehost.com, and work with the code here. So that's how simple it is to install. I'm going to show you a little bit more too about, see, we got a server request error there because we don't have this running. So I'm going to make that run again while we're here. And we are currently in a session, a tmux session at the server. If I do Control B and D, letter D, we get back to um, our main console session, and we can look at all of the sessions that I currently have running on this server by typing in tmux space ls, and these are all the sessions that we have running. Here was our Jam import session we had. So these are separate consoles. It's kind of like switching windows or switching screens in the Windows operating system. You can have different consoles, just like you could have a number of different consoles running in Windows at the same time. And we switch between those, and we can have different programs running. So we can have a server that's running and continue running while we go and do something somewhere else. Let me go ahead and show you this. We're going to switch into the demo session. So tmux demo. This is what was done in the previous tutorial. We want to do a/t demo. That switches us to this command console. You can see there we have a server running. And if I press Control C there, that is the server that was running at port 8083. So let's bring that up here so you can see how this works. Close off some of these other files. Just to have a little more familiarity with the way the Linux console works, since most hosting is done that way. We're going to go to AppStageHost. That's the domain where this little server is running, and 8083. And you can see as I run functions here, so we close this off and run favorite foods, you're going to see different command line responses. So we've got some entries that are happening as we speak. You can see what time it is. let's run I guess we don't have a filter here. We have a filter here. Let's go ahead and run a filter there. Like that. And you just continue to see that we've got some interaction there, console that's being logged. So now I'm in that session. Again, what you do is you go back and forth. I stop this. Let's go ahead and stop this just so you can see we're actually adjusting the server. If I try and run this now, since I stopped it, we'll get an error. There is no site running there at that point. So I'm going to run it again. Port 8083. Bring this up. And blammo, the app is back. So that is running in a tmux session. I'm going to Control B and D. That gets us back to our main screen. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and clear the screen, and we will list a nice clear listing of all these. And one of the things we did in the previous example was to run this application in a iframe. So I was here. This application is running in an iframe. So we got a couple things happening here. We have the, I guess that's a different, a different version. Let's see here. Take a look here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to look in my SQL page, a/t SQL page, just to give you a better understanding how this works. You can see now I have the SQL page server running, and that's very easy to understand. Just go to learn.sqlpage.com, go to the intro.html, and there's a very quick little introduction about how you set all this up. Right down here, all you need to do is get this a little faster on the screen. Let's go to the download page, open that page, just download and run the right version for your operating system. So I downloaded this Linux version, unpacked that into a folder, ran the executable, which if you look here in the server, I'm going to stop that. SQL page is no longer running. Ran SQLPage.bin. So I made that executable, and you can see this is running on port 8080. So let's go there. 8080. Let's just see if this is running. Because I'm not on app stage host. That's why I'm running this on a different server. So app stage host, who knows what port we're running this on right now? Looks like port 8080. And we have a SQL file there. There it is. We have a SQL file there in that folder, which is running a bit of code. So I can stop this here and do an ls. And you can see in our folder there, I've got a persons.sql. Let's go ahead and open that up in the editor. And there's all of our code, which I showed you in the previous tutorial. You can see all that code is running, and all we do to run that is do SQLPage.bin. When the server is running, we can run any of these SQL files and just go there. Since our server is running at 8080, we go there and we run that person SQL, and the application in that file is run here in our browser. And again, that file, stop this for a second, that file imports. Do this again. The very first thing that happens here is that imports as an iframe the application that we have running at app stage host port 8083. So that's the code that we have running in another one of these sessions. So we added a card to the page, and within that card we embed the Jam.py application as an iframe. And just to make this easier, I'm going to go ahead and run this again. Our server is running again, and just to clear and show, if I stop that, go back to our persons, the server isn't running, we're going to get a message that that is not running. There's no page there, so it can't be reached. We'll run it again. Go back here, persons, and now the application's running again. And it's inserting this app.py application, and it's running the rest of the code in that SQL page application. Okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff going on here. And to manage this sort of thing on the server, it's pretty easy. Remember, Control B and the letter D switches you back to your main root session. And what I tend to do is I will use additional sessions. So I have a SQLPage 2 session here. And what that does is I can edit my little file. So you can see I'm in the same SQLPage directory. I can edit my files and put things in there. So let's just change this from 850, for example, nano. So we have to kind of move around. Let's change that to 350, save it. And you can see now the card that was importing the jam.py file was in a 850 pixel tall iframe. If I refresh this now, I've edited that file. Now it's only taking up a much smaller space of 350 pixels. Let's change this back. Control save. I can do all this editing right on the server, or I can edit it on another machine. And now we're back to 850 pixels. So that is the SQLPage application. And SQLPage is great just for building generic web pages and for pulling out information from data so that you can display it and work with it using other UI interfaces, and also to deliver data in JSON format through an API, through a REST API, and also to consume data from APIs and insert that data into a database. And so you can talk to third-party APIs or create your own API. So interact with other applications on the web very easily in the most common way. Okay, so that's how all this is done. And just to point out one other thing, since I'm in these sessions here, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. Control B, Control D gets me back to my root session. And I'm going to go ahead and go into, I had created a Jam.db session. So Jam.db. And in this session, I have a little application called Lightly. It's a command line tool for dealing with um, databases on the server. It has some nice autocomplete, and you can do pip install Lightly to get that. So on your server, you have a nice, I got that installed, but you got a nice little uh, database manager. This is very similar to, for example, on Windows, I use Heidi SQL or dbeaver or some tool like that. Or you might use a Microsoft tool for dealing with MS SQL databases. This one in particular is made for SQLite, but they have the same maker here as similar tools for Postgres and all the other common databases. So if I do Lightly demo, which is the name of the database here that we've created in the builder, and you can see we can go up and look at the database information that's been created by the Jam.py app, and we can run SQL directly at the command line. And so it doesn't have to be Lightly, but it can be, you could just use the SQLite command line tool, or you can use some visual tool like Heidi SQL or dbeaver, and interact with your databases, or of course use any other software development tool, and SQL, or for example, SQL Alchemy, or use Ruby on Rails, or anything else that lets you interact with a database, to interact with that database. And you have all these tools that interact nicely together. SQLPage and Jam.py in this case interact beautifully because they can both access the same database, and you can run SQL on that database. So I'm going to switch back out here. First of all, I'm going to exit from this Lightly tool, Control B and Control D, and I'm back here. And now I've got a bunch of other applications running on this little demo server, fast HTML application, a Masonite application, a Wave application. These are all things. A Streamlit application. I have a little Streamlit CRUD application demoed here, and all those I can run back and forth. And just do that here so you can see. Um, let's try the Streamlit page. So I'm going to switch over to that command line and run that again. And that tells me that I'm running here on this uh, address. So I just cancel that again. And I can go to that address, and all these things are running at the same time on the server. And of course, I could use this Streamlit CRUD interface to interact with the same database that we're interacting with in the Jam.py application, or in the SQLPage application, or in any other application, and that we're interacting with on the command line using Lightly. All these things can be connected together using all different technologies, and we can just integrate them in the user interface using iframes. Very simple with web development to do that. So I'm going to show you one more time. SQLPage. Go to learnsqlpage.com. If you go to the intro, it's got a little video explaining how to do all these simple 29 lines of code, which are 11 little tiny applications, and basically how to install a bunch of other application examples. And then there's a quick start tutorial. If you know anything about coding at all, go to the quick start tutorial. That'll help you learn how to do everything from installing it, and it goes through the details of how to configure the SQLPage to use the right database. So right now we are connecting to a database. So I'm going to go back to my session here. It's called Jam.db, or actually I'm going to use SQLPage 2, because I can run things in the SQLPage directly nicely. And you can see I've got a bunch that I've done here. Let's see where we are. So it looks like there's a SQLPage directory. So let's go into this. I'm going to list the contents of that directory. And this little SQLPage.json file lets us choose the configuration for SQLPage. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that. And you can see in my database, I've set up to be the database, the SQLite database, which is in the demo folder on the server, up one folder. And it uses this file called demo, which is the SQLite single file, and sets the mode for it. So that's what enables SQLPage to use the same database. Now, you've seen how you can select different database in Jam.py using the editor, the application editor. So we go to do that, we go into the builder and we select our database parameters. So we have that in a particular file that we've saved. It's called Jam project. So if we went into that folder, we would see that file, and we could connect when we install the SQLPage binary, go in and edit this SQLPage.json to connect to the right file. And if instead it's a network-based connection, then you put in the connection information there exactly as it shows you in the SQLPage documentation, and put in the connection information in Jam.py in the database settings, and you can connect to the same database. So all that's really simple to do. Hopefully that's giving you a little bit more of an idea about how this stuff can be built out so that you can extend the capabilities of Jam.py, integrate it with other frameworks, use ChatGPT and other code generation artificial intelligence to generate code. And because this is all jQuery, Bootstrap, Python, standard JavaScript and HTML and CSS on the front end, and standard Python on the back end, all of those AIs know very well how to create code that's useful first shot, and can help you work out and troubleshoot any errors you get. And you've seen here now how to work with sessions, and how to go back and forth between using other tools on the server to interact with the database. So I think that's a pretty good round trip. And we wrote some code to do a useful thing to import XLSX files, spreadsheet files. Um, and all of that from the beginning takes very, very little time compared to using other tools. Really super productive and very easily integrated with all the other common tools in the web development world. So I'll stop there and we'll do some more with connecting to databases, other databases in the next video.